hit the synagogues today.
We're going to be staying in this country because as it happens, the United States is, well, depending on how you count, is either the largest Jewish community or just behind Israel in terms of the number of Jews. But
I recognize the Jerusalem Street Synagogue in Prague there.
yes.
I was just in a session earlier this week about the 3-week session all about Prague.
Oh, good.
It's a beautiful city.
Yeah.
I've been there a couple of times. And it's a lovely city because it never got bombed.
It is. Now I have a number for you. Can anyone guess what is this number?
Number of synagogues in America.
Good. Yes. So as of the most recent survey I could find, this is from 2002, although the number, given some contractions in some new places, probably around the same today, is the number of synagogues in the United States. Made it hard for me to figure out where to begin. So I might rely on some of your expertise and your knowledge. There are a lot of synagogues around the United States, and every single state has synagogues. Even Wyoming or Idaho or some of the places that you might think there haven't been large numbers of Jews that have made it to have established congregations. In fact, Wyoming even has a congregation dating back to 1912, which is demonstrative that every state has a congregation at least 100 years old today. Alaska and Hawaii, since they've been states, maybe they're a little less than that, but we've already looked at synagogues in both places. And just in the Cleveland area alone, there are roughly 30 congregations. So we're all familiar with many congregations in the United States, but probably not all 3,700 plus congregations around the country. I wanted to start with the oldest congregation in the country, the Spanish Portuguese Synagogue in New York City.
And UOJCY.
Oh.
So this congregation, right, was established in 1654. The building that we're looking at, however, is from the late 1800s, I believe, on the Upper West Side. Let me pull, sorry. So the Spanish and Portuguese, just a second. Has anyone been to, before we look, has anyone been to the Spanish Portuguese synagogue?
I've only been to the outside. I've never been inside.
Okay.
I lived in the neighborhood, but never got in.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we went to, when I was in high school, we had, the organization was UOJCA, which was sort of like the Orthodox from Youngstown. And we had a convention there, and we had service in there, and it's really, much as I remember, beautiful synagogue. But it was in a with a group, so it was all safe in those days.
Yes. So this synagogue, right, its official name is She'arit Israel, She'arit Israel, but known as the Spanish and Portuguese Synagogue because that's where the original Jews came from that came to this country. In 1654, the Jews who arrived in then New Amsterdam were Jews that were coming, originally the Jews were coming from Amsterdam by way of Brazil, which was a Dutch colony at the time, really the first Jews in the United States. And the first Jews that came to this country were Sephardi Jews. They were small in number and of course became far outnumbered later on between 1880 and 1920 roughly, when there was really a mass immigration from Ashkenazi communities. And today, Ashkenazi Jews, of course, comprise between 90 and 95% of American Jewry. But the very first Jews coming to this country, the majority were Sephardic Jews. And until 1825, so for a period of 1700, for a period of about 170 years, this was the only congregation in New York City. In 1825, Jewish immigrants from Germany established an Ashkenazi congregation. Currently, this is located on Central Park West at 70th Street on the Upper West Side, and this building, right, since 1897. We've looked at a number of synagogues, you know, in thinking about what synagogues, we've looked at a variety of synagogues already in the United States and U.S. territory in various sessions, whether the Touro Synagogue in Newport, Rhode Island, which is the oldest remaining synagogue building in the United States, the synagogue in St. Thomas, which is the oldest synagogue or congregation on U.S. soil. We also have looked at the largest synagogue in the country and possibly largest size-wise in the world, Temple Emmanuel, Congregation Emmanuel in New York City, and the smallest in the country in Honesdale, Pennsylvania. So we've seen a lot of different congregations already, but congregations have been established for a long time. This is the interior of the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue. Beautiful synagogue.
Beautiful.
Interior, and definitely if you're in New York after the pandemic is once allows us to kind of travel more freely, would be a wonderful place to see. Now I want to jump to the opposite coast. Shereth, Israel, the same name actually, but in San Francisco. This is among the oldest congregations built in on the West Coast and in California, and was built with Jews really coming because of the gold rush.
It's very interesting. The wood on the bima looks, I can't see it that close, but it looks almost like the facade that was at not only Temple on the Heights on Mayfield, but also the Silver's Temple at University Circle that was built by Charles Greco.
Good. So the truth is, right, there were a lot of styles that were borrowed from synagogues first in Europe, but then borrowed from one another. So this synagogue, right, was built in the Byzantine and Romanesque revival style, which is similar to the synagogues that you mentioned. This was built in 1903 was the groundbreaking. The cost of construction,
earlier.
What?
It's earlier because the other two were not built until the 1920s.
Okay, so this building is earlier. The congregation itself is older. The community is older, but this building was finalized and opened in 1905 for a cost of $250,000, which today would get you far less, of course, but at the time was the cost. And so this building and this synagogue the congregation was established really with Jews from the gold rush that came to California, and was actually retrofit and completed in 2017.
It's Orthodox?
No, this congregation today is a Reform congregation. When it was first established, I'm looking to see whether it was established as a Reform congregation. I mean, at that time, it was mostly Jews from Prussia, Bavaria, England, France, and many Jews, of course, who are coming already living in the United States that were moving westward.
Who can forget Gene Wilder as the Frisco Kid? He's
Right. This
one
is
of the funniest movies of all time. If you've never seen it, you have to see it.
Right,
So
and
funny.
right, no, it follows, right, that story in many ways, and originally, like many congregations, originally took the Bavarian German prayer that they adopted in Orthodox style, but relatively quickly, within about 20 years, kind of moved towards Reform and Classical Reform. So in the 1848, 1850s, it was founded as an Orthodox congregation. They brought in a rabbi who kind of moved the synagogue towards Reform in the 1870s, 1880s. And in 1903, when they were building this new building, officially actually joined the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, today the Union for Reform Judaism.
Rabbi,
Yes.
before you, yeah, I just came on in time. This is great. Almost 2 years ago, Larry, Nina, and I were there for my grandson's bar mitzvah.
Great.
And we couldn't stop looking at the dome. I really remember,
Yeah.
remember, it's just really beautiful. Anybody want to jump in, Larry and Nina, to talk about it?
You know what I remember, Judy, as we were walking toward it, and then you said, oh, we're here. It was humongous. The building itself takes up a city block, the building. Yeah. And it was many levels, if I remember. And the extravagance, obviously no money was spared when they built it. And I think that's what amazed me, that, you know, how elegant it was, especially that dome ceiling. But it was quite remarkable. It's probably one of the most remarkable synagogues that I have ever been in.
Yeah, I'm so excited to call my daughter later and tell her that we saw this, actually. This is cool.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Now, really one of the most phenomenal synagogues in the country in terms of its style. We have some, of course, in Cleveland that are pretty incredible here as well.
And at that time when we went, I do remember there's a plaque on the outside, you know, that gives it's like 100 years old or 100 and something years old. But the entrance, we used to enter from the side. I don't know if you remember that. So I don't know if I don't know if I've ever gone through the main entrance, but yeah, to the side they had like scaffolding and so on.
Right. Thank you. No, so this is possibly, while the building is not, this is possibly the oldest congregation in California. There's another that was started around the same time, and there's some debate, but is one of the two oldest congregations in California. And like any strong, large congregation in a major city, of course, there is a rival congregation. And that is Emmanuel in San Francisco, built in a very similar style. The exterior with the large dome. There's also a picture here of the interior. Oh, sorry. Going to just a second. But Emmanuel is really the congregation nearby that is in many ways kind of the rival congregation, also founded during the Gold Rush, and also a member now of the Union for Reform Judaism, is the other kind of large-scale Reform congregation in the area. Notably, had hired the first female cantor of any congregation in the country, believe it or not, became the cantor at the congregation, Julie Rosewald, in 1884. 1884. Not so well known. She was not officially ordained, didn't get ordination, but had the skills to be a cantor and was hired by this congregation in the year 1884. It was founded also primarily by Jews of Ashkenazi descent, and similarly, right, became very quickly a Reform congregation. And so this congregation building was completed in 1926, not too far away actually from Shereth Israel, the congregation we just saw. So another congregation you might be familiar with, today also affiliated with the Reform movement. You might recognize this building as being very similar to another synagogue we saw earlier. It was designed based on the Doheny Street Synagogue in Budapest. But Central Synagogue is one of the flagship Reform synagogues in the country. So I didn't ask, but if anyone has been to either Emmanuel in San Francisco or to Central Synagogue in New York City, we'd love to hear any thoughts before I share any more. Anyone that wants to share? I'll just share the interior. This is the interior, also based similar design to the Doheny Street Synagogue and some of the other Moorish revival synagogues in Europe. This is the interior of Central Synagogue in New York City.
I've been to the Doheny one in Budapest, but I've never been inside this one.
Right, so this is actually a beautiful synagogue, as you can see in its own right on East 55th Street. This building was actually built in 1870, really to be a copy of the Doheny Street Synagogue. And it's actually been in continuous use longer than any synagogue in New York City, and is one of the oldest existing synagogue buildings in the country.
They broadcast their services every Shabbat.
Good, so you can check out their services now if you would like. But
my cousin likes to do that.
Was this founded by Hungarian Jews?
It was founded by German Jews, actually.
But they built it
interestingly,
on the Doheny. That's interesting.
Right, even though it's right, it's the Doheny, it's based on the Doheny Street Synagogue. It's actually, it was really kind of brought together by a merger of two German Jews and Bohemian Jews, which really is German-speaking area, Germany today. And they came together to form what is today Central Synagogue. Two communities, Ahavat Chesed and Sha'ar Hashamayim, came together to build this, to create this community and then build this building in the 1870s, early 1870s. So these are some examples of some of the early synagogues. We'll also see, I want to share just a unique project, Wilshire Boulevard Temple in Los Angeles, the oldest congregation in Los Angeles. The congregation itself founded in the 1870s. We'll look at the picture again in just a minute. This was founded in 1862 as Congregation B'nai B'rith. The current building that we just looked at was built in 1929. You might also recognize it looking very similar to the Temple Tifereth Israel building that's in University Circle and other synagogues, I think, Helen, that you mentioned earlier. I wanted to share this building, though, if you look at this drawing, no, sorry. Need to share the screen again. If you look at the picture, not of the interior, but if you look next to the building, this almost futuristic looking structure, which is not a completed project yet, but the synagogue actually had a competition to build a new atrium. And the winning design was the design we see here. Oh, sorry, I'm jumping back, but the design that we see here was the winning design. This is to design a pavilion. They had a committee that actually looked at 4 different proposals. This was the design that won. It's a $75 million structure, a trapezoidal 5-story building, including a rooftop garden, office spaces, and a large vaulted ground level banquet hall to replace what was a parking lot next to the main building of the synagogue. This is one of the most affluent synagogues, not only in Los Angeles, but the country. Was a member of the Union for Reform Judaism, but actually left the Union for Reform Judaism about 10 years ago. After first joining a group called the Rabbinic Vision Initiative, a group of rabbis from large Reform congregations who became vocal critics of the Reform movement's central organization, the Union for Reform Judaism. And ultimately, this synagogue in 2011 resigned from the URJ, which was a big blow to the Union for Reform Judaism, as one of the most affluent congregations and counts among its members many large philanthropists and affluent contributors to Jewish life and to the Reform movement prior. This congregation now is an independent congregation, but formerly a member of the Union for Reform Judaism. Okay, sorry. Anyone who's been to Wilshire Boulevard Temple or wants to share anything from your experience?
I haven't been there, but they probably have a lot of like people in Hollywood at that place. I think that's from what that's what it sounds like.
Yes, just some people that are listed, and I don't know. I'll pull up kind of notable members that are listed, but Anthony Pritzker, Eli Broad, Bruce Carrots, the Glazer family, Lawrence Bender, Lowell Gantz, Jamie Gertz, Maurice Kremer, Tony Ressler, Robert Sherman, Fred Sands, Jack Warner, and Bud Yorkin are some of the people. I can list more that are notable at the congregation.
I think the Sinai Synagogue, with its big-time rabbi, whose name fails me at the moment, occasionally I listen to his services.
Yeah, David Walpe.
Yeah, I think they have a lot of celebrities. Kirk Douglas was one of their members, and I think
right, a very affluent conservative congregation, Sinai Temple.
Yeah, I went to the Sinai Synagogue because I lived just a few blocks away. And my son, who would go to shul with my father and me,
yeah.
My son was 4 years old, and he'd say, "Are we going to the Shabbos temple?"
Right. So here, I'll pull up.
We're going to the Shabbos temple.
Right, and a good friend of mine actually serves as one of the assistant rabbis at Sinai Temple in Los Angeles. But this is the synagogue, right? If you recall.
Oh.
Is
I lived in LA for 3 years.
I got in the interior, yeah. Or that's actually
the good thing about their services during the pandemic is if you don't want to wake up early on Saturday morning, they start at noon.
Do they?
Noon our time.
That's how I discovered them.
Okay, good. Right, because it's noon here already. It's a good,
right.
Good. So no, Sinai Temple, and we see it in Cleveland too. You know, whenever there's one group, and we see this all over the world, there's usually a group that creates a synagogue because they don't want to be part of that. And we see it, you know, both in the conservative and reform movement, even in Cleveland, that there are two large conservative congregations and two large reform congregations. And in Los Angeles, right, we have, in the conservative movement, you have Sinai Temple, and just not far from Sinai Temple, you have Beth Am, which is the other large conservative synagogue right in the same area.
And there's also a Sephardic shul that was built on Wilshire Boulevard that I sort of got mixed up in. And I'm not exactly sure how that happened, but a friend of mine, her family were among the founders in the Sephardic shul that had been in downtown Los Angeles. And they decided their constituents had moved further west, and they bought property. And but they needed a variance because they needed parking, and they wanted a school, and they had to go 3 blocks down from Wilshire. And there was an opposition group that had formed of non-Jews who, you know, were very active in trying to prevent the building by not letting them have the variance. And I happened to be packing to move at that time, and my neighbor said, you know, the husband said, "You've got to go down and talk to the Board of Estimate and explain that, you know, you would be a member of that congregation." And she said, "I can't speak in public." And my husband happened to wander in, and he said, "Let Jackie talk." And so I ended up addressing the Los Angeles Board of Estimate. And I did a little research before I went, because there was a used car facility that had gotten a variance for their parking lot a few blocks away, where they had to knock down several residential dwellings to do this, and they got permission. And there were these women with the hats and the three-piece suits that came along with them and the clipboards. And so I talked and I said, I understand the opposition's position, but where were they when they allowed a used car lot to be built in a residential area? I said, I have toddlers. I don't walk with their stroller over there because there are all these big rigs that I'm afraid are going to turn over and injure my family. Where were you then? I said, is a used car lot a better neighbor than a house of God? And you could have heard a pin drop in the place. And at that point, I left. And then I got a call later. Well, we got the variance. And
Good.
then
Good.
and then I moved away. There were probably burning crosses on my lawn after I left. But then I learned from a friend of mine who's part of the a Sephardic shul that got built on Ocean Parkway in Brooklyn. And she took a picture of the building after it was built. And we laugh and we say, that's the house that Jackie built.
Yeah. Good.
Well,
Good.
aren't there a lot of Sephardi Jews from Arab countries in LA?
Well,
Like
good. So we're going to
Iraqi,
actually,
yeah.
Persian in particular.
Persian, yes.
We're going to look right now. So Los Angeles, right, we might not think of it as such, but outside of Israel and New York, Los Angeles is the largest Jewish community anywhere in the world. In fact, Los Angeles County has over 700,000 Jews. And among them, as Fran, you correctly point out, there are some communities, while 90+% of American Jewry is Ashkenazi, there are specific groups of Jews that have moved en masse to particular areas. And one of those groups is the Persian Jewish community, which over 50,000 live in Los Angeles, particularly concentrated in Beverly Hills, which actually Beverly Hills today is over 61% Jewish. Predominantly made up of the Persian Jewish community, and they've built their own. This is a synagogue they've actually built, which serves really almost as a Persian Jewish community center. This synagogue, the Nessa Synagogue, is specifically for the Persian Jewish community and follows the Persian Jewish rite. We also looked, I think, earlier at a session, the Bukharan Jewish community coming from modern-day Uzbekistan, the region of Bukhara and city of Bukhara, that also comprise a similar group of about 50,000 Jews that all kind of moved to Queens, New York, and have established their own community and can be somewhat insular. In fact, the Persian Jewish community, it's taken a long time and is still not fully integrated with the Los Angeles Jewish community. They do operate their own synagogues and their own businesses, Jewish organizations. There was some concern, some disconnect because they weren't used to paying membership dues and didn't see a reason to support the larger Jewish community beyond the Persian Jewish community. And today there's some integration, but certainly not fully integrated. You can see in the picture, the Ark is actually also designed based on the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue in Amsterdam.
Where's the one in Queens? You mentioned
the Bukharan?
Where's that in Queens?
Let's look it up. I don't remember exactly where in Queens, but we can, Bukharan Jewish Community Center, Queens. Did you live in Queens? We'll see exactly where it's located.
I did. I lived in Elmhurst.
Yeah.
I lived in a lot of places.
So it's Forest Hills. 70th
in Forest
Avenue.
Hills. Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Here, we
near
can
where my
look quickly. I think
sister-in-law
we
lived.
looked briefly when we talked about Bukhara. This is the interior of the synagogue. This is in Queens, New York, the Bukharan Jewish Community Center and Synagogue.
Wow.
That's in
It's very close to where my sister-in-law lived.
Forest Hills.
Hmm.
So those are just two examples of kind of communities within a community that have so many people have settled in one space that they've really created their own sub-Jewish community within the larger Jewish community.
Thank you.
Of course, there are some synagogues which existed, and the building no longer is being used as a synagogue, but has been taken on by the community. We see Temple Tifereth Israel, which I know there's still high holiday services that run in the University Circle location, but is actually used as a performance space. This is the oldest synagogue, 1740, in Philadelphia. Before, Congregation Mikveh Israel. I wanted to jump, this is in San Diego Heritage Park. This is in San Diego, California. The building no longer used as a synagogue, but is an example of a synagogue building that today is used as an event hall, a catering hall. People still sometimes host Jewish weddings or bar and bat mitzvah ceremonies here, but this is now just in a large city park in San Diego, originally founded as a synagogue. I want to shift now to newer congregations, and we'll go through a little tour of some newer congregations, and especially what is being done in many newly built congregations. One of the key features that I want to look at is the way that light interacts with the congregation, with the sanctuary, the use of windows and light to really create an open, inviting space. But we'll take a look at a number and then would love to open it up to congregations that you've been to. I know we looked at B'nai Yeshurun in our very first session, but B'nai Yeshurun is one of the more recent. It's certainly not brand new. Today it's 40 years old, but the style of kind of bringing in an architect to design something that's a little different from the original synagogues, the older synagogues that we built that were based on older styles. So really just want to look through some of the newer synagogues. This is a construction in Palo Alto, California, and you can see the use of windows here to bring light and really create a structure which is very light and you can walk into. This is in Tiburon, California as well. Look at the use of light here. Sorry, we'll go to Temple Deher Sinai. I didn't have the picture. Congregation Shalom in Milwaukee. The way light and the stained glass and this Etz Chaim kind of lights up the sanctuary. This is in Malibu, California. Beth Al, we'll go through some of the, I'll try to look at some of the 360 views on a tour. They sometimes doesn't work that well, but I'll kind of scroll through a number of unique synagogues here. This is a synagogue that actually Rabbi Weiss was at before coming to to Cleveland. This is Shaarei Tzedek. My family actually was members of this congregation for a number of years in Detroit as well. It's actually right on the side of a highway, so you kind of see this imposing structure as you drive through. The interior, this is the sanctuary with the stained glass windows bringing in a lot of light from outside.
We always refer to it as the hood ornament synagogue.
Yeah. Yes. Here is a synagogue, well, the exterior in Portland, Maine. And the interior, this you can't see, but there's a lot of light coming in from that back side, the entrance. Temple Ahavat Achim in Gloucester, Massachusetts. You can see the windows kind of all around the exterior. And here's the interior with the windows lighting up the sanctuary. This synagogue is actually in Evansville, Indiana, a newer building, also using the window motif to really provide as much light as possible into the synagogue. We'll try to look now, and I'm going to try to bring in a tour, if it will work, to try to see a 360 view of some of the congregations here. Let me see if I can pull this up. I'll start actually in Great Barrington. Is Lynn still around?
Maybe not.
She might have needed to leave. Let me actually see if I can start with, yeah, this is the problem with this website. It had a lot of problems.
One of the synagogues in Seattle that you had pulled up just in this last sequence?
Oh, Temple to Hirsch Sinai. Yeah, I was going to pull the picture up. Have
Yeah,
you?
I was actually at that one.
Yeah, they're in this tour actually, but I'll see about sharing some images from the synagogue. It's another one that built their current building uses light. Oh, sorry. Uses windows to really provide here's the interior. You can see the whole front of the congregation is all window. And this is a picture of the exterior of the building. Here is a newer building.
You're not sharing screen right now.
You're seeing it, but we're
Oh,
not.
sorry, just a second. It was on a different screen. Sorry. Let me share the screen. This is a picture, if you can see now, of the interior with a window, kind of windows the entire front of the building, the sanctuary. And then this is the exterior of the building. This is in Seattle, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to see if the Synagogue 360 tour is working now. We're going to do a tour of some of the modern synagogues here. A few of these are not in the United States, but the large majority actually are. So we're going to skip through to get to the synagogues in the US. We saw some of these in Livorno, Italy, actually. It's a newer synagogue. This is in Kyoto, Japan. This is a little side tour from the United States. This is the Jewish community in Tokyo, Japan, has built a traditional congregation, mostly expats, not many who are from Japan, but this is Temple to Hirsch Sinai. We just saw in Seattle.
It does not look like.
I don't know if this building was just built in 2001. So I don't know if you were there since then.
Reform.
Where's the ark?
That's a good question.
Okay, other side.
Is it that cupboard in the corner?
Or the cupboard behind it, behind the ark, or behind the.
There is no cupboard.
Let's see if there's a note on where the ark is, because there's some. Let's see what it says, because I haven't been to this congregation yet. Maybe one day I'll make it, but it's a Reformed congregation. Doesn't look like it says anything about the ark. Let me.
That blue glass.
Does anyone see the ark here? Maybe we'll see if we can see a picture.
That's not the one.
Oh, this is the ark. The blue glass is the ark.
Yeah. Oh, you can see the chorus.
Dalif Name
Wait a
Yatal Med, and you can see it's glass and you open it. It's like a,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Wait a second.
Rabbi, what's distracting about some of these that have the windows behind the bima?
Yeah.
When you're looking at the bima, there's so much different light and it really bothers your eyes if it's just in the right place. But that's why at ours, when you're looking at the bima, even though we have windows on the side, it doesn't bother. There's no reflection. There's no interference for the glass. That always bothered me.
Okay, no, good. And that's good feedback. So this synagogue, right, might not be the right synagogue for you or for me, right? You got to find the right seat that doesn't blind you. But many of these synagogues use windows in ways like B'nai Yeshurun that aren't right in front. But yeah, no, it's a good point. So Helen, the darker blue glass is actually
Okay, fine.
That's
very interesting because I wouldn't have thought that was it.
Yeah.
Sunglasses required.
Good. This is the synagogue I think we just saw a picture of, but in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This is I'll just look at the pictures here, but this is the ark that has the stained glass, the Etz Chaim behind the ark in stained glass. Certainly you can all look at these congregations further. Just look at this is the synagogue in Malibu. What? It's a Reconstructionist congregation. can see, and that's the arc. And this is really the, yeah, there. This is Beth El in Minneapolis. I'll just show, I think the pictures are going to be easier to share than the 360 right now. But that's,
Oh my.
this is the front of the sanctuary. And that's the exterior of the building. So right, this building, this is actually an older building, completed in 1968, but the expansion completed in 2012 as a 1,400 family synagogue, as you can see, yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing. There are a lot of the older synagogues where they're in established neighborhoods, but then they decided to turn them into JCCs with the synagogue. I know my old synagogue in Brooklyn had that happen. It's now Park Slope Jewish Center.
Right. This synagogue we're looking at is in Portland, Maine.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Beautiful building here. If it lets me, it looks like this froze here. So we'll look here for a minute. Let me see if I've had a lot of trouble with that website, which is, it's a very nice website, but it freezes some of the time like this. Sorry about that. Let's see if we can move forward here in the time we have. Temple Ahavat Achim, we just saw in Gloucester, Massachusetts. So Adath B'nai Israel, this is the synagogue in Evansville, Indiana, built in 2003. Here's a picture of the sanctuary, again, with the windows all around, even the 10 Commandments with windows. And here's in the dark. We can see a common theme with newer construction synagogues, the importance of windows in building, and definitely look at the rest of the architecture. Really, a lot of beautiful synagogues being built more recently. Here, this is the temple I showed. This is a little older, but also has a unique use of windows in the sanctuary, in their chapel with the stained glass. And the exterior, very unique. Yeah, this synagogue in West Palm Beach, this also is the style of the synagogues. The window is kind of on the side here, coming in with the way the lighting comes in. Temple Bethel in.
Oh, definitely know this place.
Yeah,
I've been there many times. Yes.
Good.
It's quite
Anything
to
to
go
share?
into the sanctuary. The ceiling is huge. It's very high. I mean, really high. So it's very large. But yeah.
Sorry, this is
question?
Temple Bethel in Palm Beach.
Yeah, West Palm Beach.
West Palm Beach.
Actually, yeah. So the time we went,
Imagine what their air
it
conditioning
wasn't
bill
heavily
is.
attended the time we went. So 50 people in a room this size is dwarfing. But it's actually a very nice place to go to a service.
Good.
Must cost a fortune to air condition there.
They have a rather well-to-do membership. So they.
Okay, good. Good. This is in
Keep
Great
those
Barrington.
members happy.
Yeah. Great Barrington, Massachusetts, which is, I think, where Lynn is from, in the Berkshires. Can see really a modern construction. Doesn't look like many of the classic synagogues that we've looked at, but the use of light in the newer congregation building, this built in 1999, as you can see.
Does your definition of synagogue only include freestanding buildings, or does it include chapels in Jewish care facilities where services are held? How does that work?
What's considered a synagogue? Right now, we're looking at freestanding synagogues, but any place where there's Jewish worship, it would be great to look at. Do you have any particular place in mind?
No, I'm just commenting that there may be a great deal more. I mean, we all know little synagogues that meet in people's homes, but
you're saying with that number, the 3,700 number?
Right, but you could go to Menorah, or you could go to Montefiore. They all have chapels and they all have regular worship in Jewish camp facilities.
To be honest, that number came from a survey, a population study. So I'm actually not, I would need to look at and see whether that was only freestanding synagogues or not. The synagogue we're looking at right now, right at Wellesley, Massachusetts, built in 2011. Here, the windows are the back of the sanctuary. So hopefully the light comes in the right way and won't blind anyone as they're facing the front. That's right, is a Reform congregation. Anyone can stop and share if these are congregations you've been to. This a little older, but this is in Buffalo, New York. I don't know if anyone's been, just to see if I'll be able to get it. But with the stained glass being the light at the front. I don't know, has anyone been this synagogue? Not so far from us in Buffalo. I don't know if anyone's been.
I actually grew up in that synagogue.
Okay, great.
A little bit grew up in it. And the windows are the most famous because they're made by the artist Ben Shahn.
Good.
And I think my oldest sister was married there.
Oh, very nice. Let me see, our tour is, let me see if it will work. This might be, there's just a few more synagogues on the tour. We'll see if we can go through them quickly. This is a conservative synagogue built in 1992. Actually, a friend of mine just became the rabbi at this congregation. This year. It's a challenging time to start as a rabbi during the pandemic, but he still unfortunately hasn't met many congregants in person yet because he just came to the congregation this past summer. But another beautiful building with the stained glass serving as the primary lighting of the congregation, as you can see. We might get out of this here. It's a unique synagogue built in 2003. Here, let's see if, I'm not sure. We're gonna exit out because I'm not sure how if that's gonna work for us. So I'll just scroll through as we have a little time left. But yeah, but would love to hear from you about any synagogues or places that you've been. Yeah.
Rabbi, did you ever do the Frank Lloyd Wright Synagogue in Elkins Park?
So yeah, we actually went there in a previous, there were some synagogues I didn't go to because we went in previous sessions, but Beth Shalom in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania, right, is the one synagogue that was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and a beautiful synagogue in a unique style that's referred to as Mayan Revival, that's built kind of as a Mesoamerican pyramid, also using light as a key motif. The whole structure is made with windows, essentially. So I can pull that picture up. These are some of the synagogues that we just went to. Oh, and finally, this is actually in the Hamptons in Long Island, Gates of the Grove. As you can see, also kind of the unique style with windows kind of lining the ceiling there as well. I wanted to pull quickly the synagogue in Ogden, Utah, because someone mentioned you mentioned, right, that you knew someone that had high holiday services. They went to the synagogue in Ogden, Utah. Right, your husband, right. So this is the congregation. It's still there today in Ogden, Utah. I also brought, Lynn had asked about Pittsfield, Massachusetts. I just wanted to share a few other pictures.
I've been there too.
Yeah, do you want to show, where is this?
Pittsfield, Massachusetts.
Pittsfield.
That
This
looks
is the
right.
synagogue in Pittsfield, right?
Yeah, it's actually the way that they make the ark, with the wood, looks very nice. It's actually quite aesthetically pleasing. So
Good.
I happened to be in Pittsfield over a weekend and was there. So
Good. Now a beautiful
Nice.
newer
Yeah.
synagogue. I'll skip that one. I'm gonna
North
Next out
Adams
here.
is in the same area.
yeah,
Which
the same
synagogue?
general area.
Yeah, North
That's the
Adams
same
is the same
general
area.
area.
That's the
North
area that
Adams
Lynn asked about that area in particular.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
grew up in Pittsfield.
Because
Yeah.
that's where she was from. So any other new synagogues? These were kind of a tour of a number of synagogues. I had a couple last synagogues to show if we have time, but wanted to turn if there's any particular synagogues you wanted, and we can pull up pictures that you've been to or heard about.
I had one other little fact, so to speak, about Temple Bethel in West Palm Beach. The rabbi actually is from Russia.
Okay.
He grew up when it was the Soviet Union, and he was persecuted and was actually prevented from being Jewish, and so he was able to get out and came here and basically fell in love with Judaism. And his name was Leonid Feldman, and he has a lot of stories to tell. So it makes going there quite an interesting experience.
Good. Very interesting. Just share a couple other synagogues that are more recent. This is in Oakland, California. Pull some of the, sorry, I want to go, sorry. These are some pictures of this synagogue in Oakland, California. You can see actually the Hebrew, various verses from Jewish scripture lining the windows at the top of the sanctuary.
When was this built?
This particular synagogue is also
Yeah.
newer. Let me see the exact, let's see when it was built. This is actually from the, does it, I'm seeing if we can see where it's, I'm sorry, this is project gallery. I'm not seeing the exact date, but it's fairly recent.
Yeah, because I wonder if this was the synagogue my brother went to. He was saying Kaddish for my father.
Possible. I'll need to get that. They're fairly recent. I don't have the exact date. And these are a couple synagogues we actually looked at earlier, but just we'll share. This is the Reconstructionist Synagogue in Evanston, Illinois, a fairly recent building. This is Gates of the Grove, which we looked at on Long Island. Beth Shalom in San Francisco, we looked at in an earlier session. This is actually uses light as the motif, Scroll of Light Synagogue. This is actually in Israel, in Caesarea, but a recent synagogue building that uses a similar motif. So we'll stop there. But those are just some examples of some of the newest synagogues and newer synagogues being built, where really the placement of windows has become a major feature of some of the newest American synagogues, and how light interplays in the space of worship to create a meaningful prayer experience. And I think, right, as some mentioned, right, that might differ from one person to the next, but the idea is really to try to create a meaningful prayer experience. And you could see many of those synagogues also wanted to create spaces that were multi-purpose spaces, using portable chairs actually in their sanctuary as opposed to permanent pews, which is also a more recent feature, the desire to have space be multi-purpose, essentially, that the sanctuary could be transferred to be used for something else if the situation required, that the seats don't need to be permanent.
How much does security play into it? I think probably, unless it was built sometime after 9/11, I don't know how much security played into those designs.
That's interesting
It had an interior courtyard for the children to play, but if you've got all this glass at the entrance, for example, it is harder to secure.
No, you're correct. That's interesting, and it'll be interesting to see if synagogues move in a different direction because of that. But some of those were post 9/11. Yeah, Judy.
Especially the glass in the
Fran mentioned that. Interesting. I was going to mention about Shereth Israel in San Francisco that you started at the beginning. That it's a corner building, and like Nina said, it's a large building, almost unidentifiable from the outside that it's a synagogue. And of course, there's no parking lot, so you have to, circle around. But I remember talking to my daughter, and this was like before COVID, when we had guards and security all over here. It was a big thing for a few years. And I remember asking her, I don't see any, because we used to enter from the side. And I said, I don't see a guard. What's going on here? She said, nobody really is aware. Nobody knows. A car comes in and you have a family going in. I used to go to Sunday school with them. And, it would go in from the side and leave and go in again. And I guess they didn't need security. I don't remember if they had a guard for the bar mitzvah, but, it was just like, any other building. There was no security there. It's like, wow.
Then they had that big attack on that JCC in California, and I think it opened their eyes a bit.
Yeah,
could be. Yeah.
There. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, Rob, I know you would. Yeah.
I mean, I used to joke that we're safe because we live in Cleveland. Who wants us as their target? But the truth is, it doesn't matter.
And our building was attacked years ago by a young man, because our property had been where he grew up, and he attacked the glass then, and that was before 9/11.
Yeah, sad to say. Mm-hmm.
Right, and I think the other thing is it could be a distraction, the glass. I remember sitting in shul and watching the deer out the window.
I look forward to it.
Pardon me?
I love watching the deer out the window.
Of course.
But, the glass works very well, for example, in the new performance space at CIM, at the Institute of Music. There's a beautiful recital hall, and it's a huge glass wall behind it. And watching this natural space while you're listening to music works beautifully.
Yeah, it's excellent.
That's listening to music. That's not davening.
And I agree. I'm just saying it's not a distraction. It's an enhancement.
Yeah. Bob Berkowitz, did you have?
No, I just had a suggestion, and this is really interesting. I know in Canada, the main cities, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, but there's all these provinces in Canada, all the way from Gaspé to Yukon, and that they must have synagogues in that unique type of area, conducive to that, indicative of that area that they're in. And I wonder if we could ever do a session on the vast lands of Canada, not the major cities.
Yeah, we could. I mean, we can look. So I actually grew up and worked. Hope maybe after the pandemic we'll go back. But for many years was at Camp Ramah in Canada. And while most of the people come from Toronto, maybe some Montreal, and then some American cities as well, we did have. I had a camper that I worked with then that was from Newfoundland, from St. John, Newfoundland. And I talked with him. I remember talking with him. There is a Jewish community, a small Jewish community, and they do have a synagogue there. So you're definitely correct. There are communities, certainly in Halifax, Nova Scotia has a sizable Jewish community. And St. John's, while small, St. John, Newfoundland had a community as well. So definitely we can look as part of a session. I'll see if I can pull as we look in the Americas, because next week, I want to look also, was suggested Mexico and Central America communities, but we can also look at some Canadian communities and then move to the other large center and look at some Israeli synagogues as well. I know we've looked at various points. We've already seen a number of Israeli synagogues, but to look at some more Israeli synagogues before our final session, where we'll really it will be a wrap up and any synagogues that we've missed that are worth looking at, and would love to hear any suggestions for that final session. So thank you. It's always a pleasure. I'll stay on if there's any final things that anyone wants to share for a minute. But next week we'll go to Canada and to Central America and Israel, and then our final session will be on March 25th, just before Passover.
Okay, good.
So great to have everyone with us.
Okay.
Wonderful
Rabbi.
as
Thank you,
always.
Rabbi.
And look forward to seeing everyone soon.
Thank you.
Rabbi,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I did have one question for you. I think you mentioned that you had been in Toronto.
Yeah, well, I've been there many times because, and my sister lives there.
Well, I recently found out a number of years ago, on my mother's side, one of her cousins married into the Tannenbaum family, who apparently were immigrants, I think before the war. And they were one of, or no, like before World War I, like early, first wave maybe. Anyway, I think they established the first synagogue in Toronto.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I actually have a cousin who also married into the Tannenbaum family. So there may be some connections.
They were really,
If it's the same,